Beneath the blazing sun of the Aegean, a small cluster of rocky islands and rugged mainland birthed a civilization that would ripple through time, shaping the world as we know it. Ancient Greece wasn't just a place, it was an idea, a spark that ignited some of humanity's most profound achievements. Democracy, philosophy, art, science, literature. These weren't just concepts born in dusty halls, but living legacies that continue to breathe life into modern thought and creativity. Step into a world where ordinary citizens dared to govern themselves, challenging the age-old belief that power should rest in the hands of the few. Athens, a city teeming with voices of merchants, farmers, and philosophers, planted the seeds of democracy. These were not perfect systems, far from it. But imagine the audacity of ordinary men deciding their laws and future, rather than cowering before kings and tyrants. The echoes of their debates, heated and passionate, resonate in every parliament and voting booth across the globe. Philosophy, too, found its voice here. In the bustling agora, Socrates wandered barefoot, asking questions that peeled back the layers of what people thought they knew. He questioned everything, from the nature of justice to the purpose of life itself. His relentless curiosity became a torch passed to Plato and then to Aristotle, who gave structure to human thought. These men didn't just think about the stars, they aimed to understand humanity's place beneath them. Today, their questions still challenge us, urging us to think deeper and demand more from ourselves and our world. But ancient Greece wasn't just about big ideas, it was about beauty, too. Their art was more than decoration, it was a celebration of life's balance and harmony. Sculptors like Phidias captured the human form not as it was, but as it aspired to be, graceful, strong, and timeless. The Parthenon, rising against the Attic sky, wasn't just a building. It was a statement of perfection, of mathematics married to imagination. Its columns, carefully crafted, seem alive with purpose, reminding anyone who stands before it that beauty and logic can coexist. And their theaters. Under the open sky, audiences sat on stone benches, waiting to be stirred by tragedies that broke hearts and comedies that mended them. Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, they weren't just playwrights. They were mirrors, holding up reflections of humanity's flaws and virtues. Their characters, Oedipus, Antigone, Medea, still walk beside us, asking questions about fate, justice, and love. Science, too, flourished under Greek hands. While others looked at the stars with wonder, Greeks began to chart their paths. Thales measured the heavens, Hippocrates sought to heal the body, and Archimedes played with the principles that underpin modern engineering. These weren't men chasing superstition, but seekers of understanding, leaving behind a legacy of logic and innovation. And their literature, the myths and epics. Imagine hearing Homer's words for the first time, the cadence of the Iliad and the Odyssey weaving tales of heroism and hubris. These weren't just stories. They were lifeblood, teaching values, passing down memories, and binding communities together. Achilles, Odysseus, and Penelope, they are not lost to time. They live on in the books we read, the movies we watch, and the dreams we chase. What makes all of this so remarkable is how it continues to inspire. In every election, in every university classroom, in every museum where a statue stands under soft lighting, in every opera house where a tragic hero falls, there is Greece. It's in the structure of our governments, the questions we ask about existence, the standards of beauty we hold dear, and the inventions that drive progress. These gifts from a small, ancient civilization weren't accidents. They came from a people who believed in pushing the boundaries of what was known, what was possible. They weren't content with surviving. They wanted to flourish, to leave their mark on the world. And they did. What follows is the story of how this civilization took shape, how its people rose and stumbled, and how, even in their imperfections, they changed the course of history. This isn't just about what they created, but why they created it. It's about humanity's enduring quest to understand itself and the world it inhabits. The sun dips low over the rugged hills, casting long shadows across a land of jagged peaks and hidden valleys. The air carries the tang of salt from the restless sea, which stretches endlessly, dotted with islands like scattered jewels. This is not a place that gives easily. The mountains are stubborn, the soil thin, the land divided. Yet it was here, among these challenging landscapes and shimmering waters, that one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known was born. The mountains rise like sentinels, carving Greece into a patchwork of isolated pockets. Villages cling to steep slopes, separated by formidable ridges that seem to defy connection. Travel overland is no simple task. Every journey demands effort, every crossing of a mountain pass a triumph. But these very barriers became something unexpected. They shaped the hearts and minds of the people. Instead of a single, unified state, Greece gave rise to city-states, or polis. Each one, from Athens to Sparta to Corinth, grew fiercely independent, like children born into the same family yet determined to forge their own paths. In these city-states, identity was forged. The mountains, which could have bred isolation, instead nurtured a sense of fierce pride and competition. The people of each polis spoke the same language, worshipped the same gods, and yet their loyalty burned brightest for their own cities. To be Athenian was not to be Spartan, and both would wear their distinctions like a badge of honor. And yet, despite their differences, these city-states were bound by something deeper, a shared culture that thrived under the same skies and breathed the same salty air. The sea was another master that ruled this land, though it offered not barriers, but possibility. The Aegean and Mediterranean waters called to the Greeks like a siren song. Where the mountains hemmed them in, the sea whispered of freedom. It was a highway, a giver of life, a source of adventure and discovery. Every coastal village looked out at the horizon, knowing that across the waters lay trade, knowledge, and wealth. For the Greeks, the sea was both a promise and a challenge, its ever-changing moods demanding both respect and ingenuity. Wooden ships creaked against the tides, their sails snapping in the wind as they carried olive oil, wine, and pottery to distant shores. From Egypt came papyrus and grain, from Phoenicia, the alphabet that would become the Greek script. The Greeks were not just traders, they were sharers of ideas. Each exchange at a bustling port was more than a transaction, it was an encounter with a new way of thinking, a new way of being. The sea turned the Greeks outward, making them travelers, merchants, and storytellers. Islands sprinkled across the Aegean became stepping stones for cultural exchange. Crete, with its labyrinthine palaces and stories of bull-leaping rituals, left its mark on the Greek imagination. Delos, sacred and serene, drew pilgrims from across the known world. Rhodes, its harbors teeming with ships, stood as a testament to the lifeblood of commerce. These islands weren't just dots on a map, they were crossroads where the pulse of the ancient world could be felt most strongly. Even the land itself seemed to shape the Greeks' relationship with the divine. The mountains were seen as the homes of gods, Olympus rising high above all, its peak veiled in clouds, mysterious and unreachable. The sea was the realm of Poseidon, unpredictable and mighty. Every grove, every spring, every rugged coastline seemed to hold a fragment of the sacred. Living among such grandeur, how could the Greeks not feel that the world was alive, that every element of their environment was imbued with meaning? Trade routes began to stretch farther, reaching into the heart of the ancient world. To the east lay the great empires of Persia and Mesopotamia, to the west, the burgeoning power of Rome. Greek goods traveled far and wide, but more than that, Greek ideas began to spread. The stories of Homer, the debates of philosophers, the designs of their architects, all carried by the wind and waves to distant lands. And as they shared, they learned. Foreign influences seeped into their culture, enriching it, broadening it. The Greeks, while proud, were never insular. They absorbed what they encountered, transformed it, and made it their own. Back on land, the polis hummed with life. Each city-state, nestled in its own unique landscape, thrived in ways that suited its surroundings. Athens, with its access to the sea, became a center of trade and intellectual fervor. Sparta, surrounded by mountains, turned inward, honing a society built on discipline and strength. Corinth, situated at a crossroads of land and sea, prospered as a hub of commerce. Each polis was a reflection of its environment, its people molded by the land that cradled them. The rhythms of life in Greece were dictated by this interplay of land and sea. Farmers worked small plots of land, coaxing wheat, grapes, and olives from the earth. Fishermen cast their nets into the waters, pulling out the sustenance of daily life. Merchants counted their profits in bustling harbors, their goods a testament to the connectivity of the ancient world. And through it all, the Greeks looked out at their surroundings with both reverence and determination, seeing challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities to adapt and thrive. The geography of Greece was not easy. It was not gentle. But in its ruggedness, its beauty, and its unpredictability, it inspired a people to greatness. The mountains divided them, but the sea united them. The land demanded hard work, but the rewards were worth the effort. And from these contrasts, from these daily struggles and triumphs, arose a culture that could not be contained by time or distance. The Greeks may have been shaped by their land and sea, but in turn, they reshaped the world. The wind dances across the azure waters of the Aegean, carrying whispers of a world long gone but never forgotten. On the island of Crete, surrounded by the sea's endless embrace, a civilization arose that was as enchanting as the myths it inspired. The Minoans, shrouded in mystery, carved their place in history with a culture so vibrant, so alive, that its echoes can still be felt in the stones of their palaces and the stories of their gods. Knossos stands, even in ruins, as a testament to their brilliance. Its sprawling corridors twist and turn like the labyrinth of legend, where King Minos ruled, and the Minotaur lurked in shadows. But this wasn't a place of fear, it was a place of innovation. Frescoes in vivid colors tell of a world filled with grace and joy. Women in flowing garments, men leaping over bulls, dolphins painted with a fluidity that mirrors the sea itself. Life here wasn't just survival, it was celebration. The Minoans were masters of their world. Their ships, sleek and swift, cut through the waves to carry their wares, precious pottery, fine textiles, and the wealth of Crete's fertile lands, to distant shores. Egypt, Mesopotamia, the islands of the Aegean, all felt the touch of Minoan hands. Trade was their lifeblood, and at every exchange, they wove connections that spread their influence far beyond their island home. But there was more to the Minoans than trade. Their connection to the divine was profound, their rituals steeped in the natural world around them. In sacred caves and on mountaintops, they offered their prayers, seeking harmony with the gods they believed guided their lives. The snake goddess, her arms outstretched, her serpents coiled in her hands, embodied the earth's power and the cycle of life. The bull, strong and untamed, became a symbol of both reverence and awe. And yet, even the greatest civilizations are not immune to the turning of time. The earth itself seemed to conspire against the Minoans. A catastrophic eruption on the island of Therath sent shockwaves through their world. Tsunamis lashed their shores, the skies darkened with ash, and their carefully balanced society began to teeter. The once thriving palaces fell silent, their walls crumbling as the Minoan light dimmed. From the ashes of Crete's grandeur, another civilization began to rise, one with a different spirit, a fiercer edge. Across the waters on the mainland, the Mycenaeans were building their own legacy. Where the Minoans celebrated beauty, the Mycenaeans revered power. Their citadels, perched atop hills and surrounded by thick walls, were fortresses that spoke of strength and defiance. Lions carved in stone guarded their gates, their silent roars echoing through the ages. The Mycenaeans were warriors, their lives steeped in the honor and brutality of battle. But they were also poets and storytellers, weaving tales that would endure long after their world had fallen. Their wealth was legendary, their tombs filled with golden masks, intricate weapons, and treasures fit for kings. These were the people who would inspire the great epics of Homer, their deeds echoing in the verses of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Yet the Mycenaeans were more than just conquerors. They carried the flame of Minoan culture, blending it with their own. The graceful art of Crete found a place in Mycenaean palaces, the labyrinthine myths of the Minoans became entwined with their own stories of gods and heroes. Even their written language, Linear B, bore the marks of Minoan influence, a bridge between the two worlds. But like the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, too, would face their twilight. Whether it was invasion, internal strife, or the mysterious forces of change, their palaces were abandoned, their power diminished. The Bronze Age world they had ruled slipped away, leaving behind only ruins and remnants. And yet, their legacy was far from lost. In the centuries that followed, the stories of these two civilizations, one born of beauty, the other forged in strength, were woven into the tapestry of what would become ancient Greece. The Minoans' reverence for nature, their love of art and ritual, would inspire the gods of Olympus and the temples built in their honor. The Mycenaeans' tales of heroism, their thirst for glory, would shape the values of a culture that celebrated both the mind and the might. The Minoans danced in the light of a golden age, their world a testament to life's joys and possibilities. The Mycenaeans stood in the shadow of their fortresses, their swords and shields a reflection of their resolve. Together, these civilizations laid the foundations for what was to come, their spirits entwined like the currents of the sea that carried them across the ages. The fires had died out. The grand palaces of Mycenae, once vibrant with life and power, now lay in ruins, their stone walls silent witnesses to a world crumbled into ash. Across the Greek mainland, the light of civilization seemed to flicker, growing dim under the weight of chaos. The great kings were gone, their riches buried or plundered. The voices that sang of gods and heroes now spoke in whispers, fearful of what lay ahead. This was the Greek Dark Ages, a time of loss, uncertainty, and quiet resilience. For centuries, life became smaller, simpler. Grand trade routes vanished, the far-reaching connections severed. People turned inward, retreating into small, scattered communities. The rich tapestries of Minoan and Mycenaean art gave way to stark simplicity, their intricate beauty replaced by bare necessity. Writing, once a vital tool of administration and storytelling, disappeared, leaving only silence where once there were records and epics. The world seemed to have shrunk, its horizons narrowed, its dreams diminished. And yet, even in the shadow of collapse, seeds of something new began to take root. In the hills and valleys, where families huddled together for safety and survival, a slow, steady transformation was taking place. These small groups, bonded by hardship, began to grow closer, stronger. They were no longer just clusters of people, they were communities. And these communities, bound together by shared land, shared work, and shared struggle, started to form identities that would shape the future. The polis was born not in grandeur, but in necessity. These city-states, each a world of its own, became the beating heart of Greek life. They grew from the ashes, rooted in the soil of shared experience. No longer tied to the splendor of sprawling kingdoms, the people found power in unity. Villages gathered around central meeting places, where decisions were made not by kings, but by the collective will of the people. It was here, in these small gatherings, that the seeds of democracy were first planted, seeds that would one day grow into towering ideals. The polis became more than just a place to live. It was identity, pride, and purpose. To be part of a polis was to belong to something greater, to feel the pulse of shared life coursing through every action. These city-states were fiercely independent, yet they carried a thread of connection that ran through them all. The Greeks were learning something profound. Strength came not just from walls or weapons, but from people working together, forging bonds of loyalty and tradition. Across the land, traditions began to emerge. Festivals lit up the dark days, bringing people together to honor their gods and their shared humanity. Songs and stories were passed down, weaving a tapestry of collective memory. The myths of Zeus, Hera, Athena, and Apollo were born, not just as tales of the divine, but as reflections of the human spirit. Around the hearths and under the open skies, these stories became anchors, holding the people steady as they rebuilt their lives. And then, there was the return of the spoken word, rising again like a phoenix from the ashes of forgotten script. The bards, wandering storytellers, kept the past alive, their voices carrying the epic tales of old. The lines of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey took shape in this oral tradition, etched into the hearts of those who listened. These were not just stories of heroes and gods, they were reminders of what had been, and what could be again. As the years stretched on, the polis began to flourish. The small, struggling communities found their footing, their once humble beginnings growing into centers of culture and activity. Shared practices, whether in religion, governance, or art, became the glue that bound these city-states together. The Greeks might live in separate polis, but they were united by their rituals, their language, and their unshakable belief in the value of human life and potential. And the land itself began to hum with the signs of recovery. Farmers tilled the earth with renewed vigor, coaxing grain and olives from the soil. Blacksmiths shaped metal, their forges glowing like beacons in the night. Potters spun their wheels, creating works that carried the fingerprints of a reborn culture. The walls of the polis stood tall, not as barriers, but as symbols of safety and belonging. The shared traditions of the Greeks began to stretch beyond the polis. In sacred spaces like Delphi and Olympia, people from across the land gathered, laying down their differences to worship together, to compete, and to celebrate what it meant to be Greek. The Panhellenic festivals were more than events, they were proof that even in their independence, the city-states were part of something larger, a shared cultural identity that no darkness could extinguish. The Dark Ages may have silenced the grand songs of old, but they could not silence the spirit of the Greeks. In the quiet, in the struggle, something profound was born, a culture that understood the value of connection, the power of shared purpose, and the strength that comes from rising together after the fall. The peaks of Mount Olympus pierced the heavens, shrouded in mist and mystery. To the people below, it is more than a mountain, it is a throne, a sanctuary for the immortal beings who shape the world. The gods dwell there, their presence felt in every shadow and beam of light, every storm and whisper of the wind. They are powerful and passionate, wise and vengeful, embodying the full spectrum of human emotions and experiences. To the Greeks, they are not distant deities, they are neighbors, family, and rivals, as real as the earth beneath their feet. At the heart of this divine assembly is Zeus, the king of the gods, his thunderbolts a symbol of his authority. He commands the skies, his voice heard in the rolling thunder, his anger felt in the flash of lightning. But Zeus is more than a figure of fear, he is also the protector of law and order, the upholder of oaths, the one to whom all must answer. His rule is both majestic and flawed, reflecting the complexities of leadership and the burdens of power. Beside him stands Hera, the queen, her gaze as fierce as her love is unyielding. She is the goddess of marriage and family, yet her own life is marked by betrayal and heartbreak. Her strength is legendary, her vengeance feared, yet beneath it all lies a deep devotion to her role and her people. Hera's presence reminds the Greeks that even the gods, and all their glory, are not immune to the trials of love and loyalty. Below them, the gods spread out across the earth and seas, each one a force of nature and culture. Poseidon rules the oceans, his trident stirring waves into fury or calming them with a touch. He is both a giver of life and a destroyer, his moods as changeable as the waters he commands. Athena, born fully armed from Zeus's head, stands as the embodiment of wisdom and strategy. She is the protector of cities, her olive branch a symbol of peace, her spear a warning to enemies. Then there is Apollo, golden and radiant, the god of the sun, music, and prophecy. His lyre fills the air with melodies that soothe and inspire, his words shaping the destinies of kings and warriors. His twin, Artemis, roams the wilds, her bow always ready, her presence a celebration of independence and the untamed beauty of nature. Dionysus, wild and intoxicating, brings the gift of wine and revelry, blurring the line between joy and chaos, reason and madness. But the gods are not perfect. They quarrel, they scheme, they make mistakes. They love deeply, hate fiercely, and punish mercilessly. They are, in essence, a mirror of humanity, their flaws making them relatable, their power making them awe-inspiring. Through their myths, the Greeks see themselves, both their potential for greatness and their vulnerability to failure. The myths are more than stories, they are lessons, warnings, and celebrations of life's complexities. The tale of Persephone, taken to the underworld by Hades, speaks of loss and renewal, her return each spring a reminder of nature's cycles and the enduring bond between mother and child. The labors of Heracles, each task more impossible than the last, show the value of perseverance, the triumph of will over adversity. The tragedy of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, warns against hubris, urging balance and wisdom. These tales were woven into the fabric of everyday life. They were told around fires, performed in theaters, and inscribed on pottery and temple walls. They explained the unexplainable, gave meaning to suffering, and provided guidance for the future. The gods were not distant rulers, they were active participants in human life, their presence felt in every corner of existence. Religion was not separate from the rest of Greek life, it was its foundation. Temples stood at the heart of every polis, their columns reaching toward the heavens, their interiors alive with offerings and prayers. Priests and priestesses served as intermediaries, their rituals ensuring the gods' favor and the city's prosperity. Festivals brought communities together, their dances and sacrifices forging a bond between the mortal and the divine. The gods' influence extended into politics and governance. Leaders sought their guidance, consulting oracles like the one at Delphi, where Apollo's priestess spoke in riddles that shaped decisions of war and peace. Laws were said to have divine approval, their justice a reflection of cosmic order. Even the concept of democracy, so central to Greek identity, was tied to the idea of divine fairness, a belief that the gods valued balance and equity. But the gods were not just protectors of the state, they were protectors of the individual. Every person had their patron, their guardian, their source of inspiration. From the hearth goddess Hestia, who watched over families, to the trickster Hermes, who guided travelers and merchants, the gods were woven into the very essence of life. Their presence offered comfort and purpose, a sense of connection to something greater. As the sun set over Greece, casting long shadows over the temples and hills, the people would look to the heavens, their eyes tracing the constellations named for heroes and myths. In the stars, they saw the stories of their gods, the struggles and triumphs that defined their world. The gods of Olympus were not just beings to be worshipped, they were companions on the journey of life, their tales a reminder that even in chaos, there is order, even in darkness, there is light. The clash of swords echoes across the plains of Troy, a sound that carries the weight of honor, betrayal, and the eternal longing for glory. On one side stands Achilles, his rage like a fire consuming everything in its path. On the other, Hector, noble and unyielding, his every step a testament to courage. Between them lies fate, indifferent and unchanging, its threads weaving a story that will echo through time. This is the world of Homer, where gods and mortals share the stage, and every action holds the weight of eternity. The Iliad begins not with triumph, but with anger. Achilles, the greatest of the Greeks, burns with fury, not at the enemy, but at his own people. The theft of a prize, the slight to his honor, is enough to draw him away from the battlefield, leaving the Greeks vulnerable. Yet this rage, so destructive, is also the essence of what makes him unforgettable. Achilles is flawed, but his flaws are what make him real. His battles are not just against foes, but against his own pride, his humanity laid bare for all to see. Homer's world is not black and white. The Trojans, once vilified as the enemy, are shown with a depth that transcends the simple divide of war. Hector, their greatest hero, fights not for conquest, but for family and home. His moments with his wife Andromache and their son are among the most tender in all of literature. He knows the odds are against him, knows the gods favor the Greeks, yet he stands firm. His death, foretold and unavoidable, is a blow that reverberates through the ages, a reminder of the cost of war and the fragility of human life. Amidst the chaos and carnage, the Iliad asks what it means to be a hero. It is not just strength or skill that defines greatness, but a willingness to face one's destiny, to meet the inevitable with courage. Achilles finds his answer not in rage, but in compassion, as he returns Hector's body to a grieving Priam. It is a moment of profound humanity, where enemies see each other not as adversaries, but as fathers, sons, and men bound by the same threads of mortality. If the Iliad is a tale of war, the Odyssey is a tale of home. Odysseus, the wily king of Ithaca, is a different kind of hero. His strength lies not in brute force, but in his mind, his ability to outwit and endure. The Odyssey is a story of longing, of a man's journey through danger and temptation to return to the life he loves. Yet it is also a story of resilience, of how one survives the storms of life and holds on to what truly matters. From the Cyclops to the Sirens, each trial tests not only Odysseus's cleverness but his resolve. He faces monsters and gods, the wrath of Poseidon and the allure of Calypso, yet his thoughts remain fixed on Ithaca. His journey is not just a physical one, but a test of character, a forging of identity. Odysseus is not perfect, his pride often leads to disaster, but he learns, he grows, and he never stops striving. And waiting for him is Penelope, whose patience and loyalty mirror her husband's struggles. She is as much a hero as Odysseus, her strength quiet but unyielding. Her weaving, her wit, her ability to fend off suitors for 20 years speak of a love that endures against all odds. Together, their reunion is not just a personal triumph, but a celebration of the unbreakable bond between those who refuse to give up on each other. Homer's epics shape more than stories, they shaped a people. The Greeks looked to Achilles and Hector, Odysseus and Penelope, as mirrors of their ideals. To be Greek was to value courage, wisdom, loyalty, and the pursuit of excellence. It was to understand that life's greatest battles are not always fought with swords, but with the heart and mind. The Iliad and the Odyssey are more than poems, they are a call to live fully, to embrace the struggles and joys that define what it means to be human. Through their heroes, Homer gave the Greeks, and the world, a legacy that continues to inspire, reminding us that even in the face of fate, there is greatness in striving, and in the journey, there is meaning. The sound of voices rises like a tide, filling the open air of the Pnyx in Athens. Hundreds of men, young and old, gather under the broad Athenian sky, their cloaks wrapped tightly against the morning chill. There is no throne here, no scepter, no single figure towering over the rest. Instead, the power rests among them, shared equally by those who have come to speak and listen, to argue and decide. In this place, under the sun's watchful gaze, a radical idea takes shape, freedom, shaped not by kings or gods, but by the hands of ordinary people. But Athens was not always a city of equals. In its earliest days, it was a land ruled by aristocrats, where power flowed from bloodlines and wealth, and the common man toiled in silence. It was a city divided, its people bound by chains both real and unseen. Farmers sank into debt, their land seized, their families sold into servitude. Hope seemed as distant as the stars above the Acropolis. Then came Solon, the lawgiver. A man of wisdom and vision, he stood between the powerful and the powerless and dared to change the rules. He abolished the cruel practice of debt slavery, freeing those who had been shackled by injustice. He redistributed power, giving the people a voice in their own governance, no matter their wealth or birth. Solon's reforms were bold, but they were only the beginning. His laws planted a seed, a fragile promise that one day, every citizen would stand as an equal. Years passed, and the city grew restless again. The old elites fought to regain their control, while the common people demanded more than just words. It was Cleisthenes who took the next great step, breaking the grip of the aristocracy once and for all. He redrew the lines of Athens, dividing it not by privilege or power, but by geography and community. In doing so, he created something extraordinary, a democracy where every citizen had the right to participate, to speak, to shape the fate of the city. The assembly became the beating heart of Athens, a place where citizens gathered to debate matters of war and peace, to decide the laws that would guide their lives. It was chaotic, passionate, and fiercely alive. Voices clashed and converged, ideas rising like sparks from a fire, illuminating the path forward. There were no rulers in this assembly, only citizens, equals standing shoulder to shoulder, bound by their shared commitment to the polis. Justice, too, was placed in the hands of the people. The courts of Athens were vast, with juries drawn from everyday citizens who swore to uphold the laws with fairness and integrity. There were no judges in flowing robes, no lawyers spinning tales. The people themselves listened, questioned, and decided. It was a system that trusted in the wisdom of the many, a trust that was both revolutionary and fragile. But Athens was not just a city of laws and debates. It was a city of the mind, where thought flourished like vines on the hills of Attica. In its golden age, it became a beacon of art, philosophy, and knowledge, a place where the human spirit reached for the infinite. The same democracy that gave the people their voice also nurtured a culture of creativity and inquiry, where ideas could be shared and challenged freely. The Parthenon rose above the city, a masterpiece of marble and ambition, its columns a testament to the harmony and balance that defined Athenian ideals. In its shadows, philosophers like Socrates walked the streets, asking questions that peeled back the layers of existence, daring others to think beyond the surface. To live in Athens was to be surrounded by beauty and brilliance, to feel the weight and wonder of being part of something greater. Tragedy and comedy took the stage in open-air theaters, where the dramas of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides wrestled with the deepest questions of the human condition. Laughter and tears mingled in the audience, their voices echoing against the stone, as they watched their own struggles and hopes reflected on the stage. These were not just performances, they were acts of communion, binding the city together in a shared exploration of what it meant to be human. In every corner of Athens, from the bustling agora to the quiet sanctuaries of its temples, there was a sense of possibility, of striving toward something greater. The people of Athens were not perfect. They argued, they stumbled, they fell prey to greed and hubris, but they never stopped seeking. Their democracy was not just a system of government, it was a way of life, a belief in the power of collective action, and the idea that every voice mattered. As the sun set over the Acropolis, its golden light bathing the city in warmth, Athens stood as a testament to what humanity could achieve when it dared to dream of a world where power was shared, where ideas flourished, and where every person had a place in shaping their destiny. The cry of a newborn echoes in the Spartan barracks. It's not the soft cooing of a family gathered around a cradle, but a critical moment, a judgment. Will this child, this tiny, fragile life, grow strong enough to carry the weight of Sparta's legacy? The elders look on, their faces etched with the hardness of a world that demands perfection. The child's fate is decided, not by love, but by necessity. In Sparta, survival is not a birthright, it is earned. This is a city unlike any other, a place where every stone, every action, every heartbeat is shaped by one purpose, to defend and preserve. While Athens celebrated ideas and art, Sparta worshipped discipline. Its streets were lined not with marble statues, but with the silent determination of its people. This was not a society of ease or luxury. It was forged in fire, each citizen shaped into a soldier, a protector, a piece of an unbreakable whole. The foundations of this life were built on the labor of the Helots. These conquered people tilled the fields, tended the flocks, and ensured that Sparta's citizens were free to train, to fight, to fulfill their role as warriors. Yet, this reliance came at a cost. The Helots outnumbered their Spartan masters, a constant reminder of vulnerability. To maintain control, the Spartans were ruthless, their society locked in an unending vigilance against rebellion. It was this tension, this fear, that sharpened Sparta's focus, making it one of the most formidable military powers the world has ever known. At the heart of Sparta's strength was the agoge, a training system as relentless as it was unyielding. From the age of 7, Spartan boys were taken from their families and placed into the hands of the state. Their childhood was stripped away, replaced by a life of discipline, hardship, and learning. The agoge demanded not only physical perfection but mental resilience. Pain was a teacher, hunger a companion. A boy learned to steal food to survive, and if he was caught, it was not the theft that was punished, but the failure to succeed without detection. Weakness was not tolerated. Strength was everything. Yet, amidst the rigors, there was also a bond. These boys, growing together in the shadow of Spartan ideals, became brothers. They learned to rely on one another, to trust, to fight as one. The battlefield was not a place of individual glory but of unity. A Spartan did not stand alone, he was a part of the phalanx, a shield in one hand, a spear in the other, defending the man beside him. To break rank was the ultimate disgrace, for it endangered not just oneself but the entire force. Spartan women, too, bore the weight of this society's ideals. While they did not march to war, they were entrusted with the future of Sparta. They were expected to be strong, to raise warriors, to embody the virtues of resilience and pride. Come back with your shield, or on it, they would tell their sons and husbands as they departed for battle. It was not cruelty, but love shaped by necessity, a love that understood the price of freedom. The government of Sparta was as disciplined as its people. Two kings ruled side by side, balancing each other's power, ensuring no single man could dominate. Beneath them, the Gerousia, a council of elders, provided wisdom born of experience. The Apella, an assembly of Spartan citizens, had its say as well, though its voice was measured, its decisions framed by the needs of a society always on guard. Spartan governance was a testament to stability, a system designed not for change but for endurance. In Athens, democracy thrived, and individuality was celebrated. Philosophers debated the meaning of life, artists created works that transcended time, and citizens voted on matters that shaped their world. But Sparta stood apart, a stark contrast in its silence, its unwavering focus. Where Athens valued debate, Sparta valued obedience. Where Athens sought beauty, Sparta sought strength. It was this duality that defined ancient Greece, a balance of opposites that together created a civilization of unmatched depth and power. The two cities could not have been more different, yet their fates were entwined. Athens was the mind, and Sparta was the body, a partnership, a rivalry, a tension that drove them both to greatness. Together, they showed the world what it meant to dream and to endure, to build and to protect. In the end, Sparta was not just a city. It was an ideal, a vision of what could be achieved through discipline, unity, and sacrifice. Its people lived not for themselves, but for something greater, a legacy carved into the very stones of their city. And though the walls of Sparta may no longer stand, its spirit endures, a testament to the strength of the human will. The trumpets blared, their sound carrying over the hills and valleys of Olympia. Beneath the blazing summer sun, people from every corner of the Greek world gathered in a swirl of excitement. Here were men from Athens and Sparta, Corinth and Thebes, their cities often locked in bitter rivalry, yet now they stood shoulder to shoulder, not as enemies but as something more, a shared identity forged in the fires of competition and tradition. A herald stepped forward, invoking the gods to witness this gathering. Zeus, the father of gods and men, was called upon as the unifier of all Greeks. For this brief time, old feuds were set aside. A sacred truce had been declared, halting wars so that all could safely travel to this holy ground. It was more than just a momentary pause, it was a reminder that beyond the walls and the differences lay a bond as ancient as the olive trees dotting the land. Yet, unity was never simple in Greece. This was a land of fiercely independent city-states, each with its own government, customs, and ambitions. Athens valued its democracy, while Sparta cherished its discipline. Corinth thrived on trade, and Thebes built its strength on its army. Their rivalries were as sharp as their spears, and their alliances as fragile as the winds that danced across the Aegean Sea. Wars erupted frequently, bitter clashes where lives were lost, and cities burned. Yet, amid these conflicts, there remained an unspoken truth, a sense that they were all part of something greater. They spoke the same language, worshipped the same gods, and shared the same stories of heroes and monsters. Their poets and playwrights wove myths that every Greek could claim as their own. Achilles and Odysseus were not just heroes of one city but of all Greece. The Olympic Games stood as the ultimate symbol of this shared heritage. Every 4 years, athletes came from across the Greek world to compete in running, wrestling, chariot racing, and more. Victory was not rewarded with gold, but with a simple crown of olive leaves, a symbol of honor and excellence. For the victor, there was no greater glory than to stand before the crowd and hear his name called, not as a son of a city but as a champion of all Greece. In these games, the Greeks celebrated not just physical strength, but the virtues they held dear: courage, discipline, and the pursuit of excellence. Even in the midst of competition, there was respect. An athlete who cheated was not just disgraced, he was seen as betraying the spirit of the Greek world itself. The Olympics were more than games, they were a celebration of what it meant to be Greek, a living testament to the unity that lay beneath the rivalries. This spirit extended beyond Olympia. The Delphic oracle, nestled in the sacred precinct of Apollo, drew pilgrims from across the Greek world seeking guidance. The priestess, her voice steeped in divine mystery, offered prophecies that shaped the fates of individuals and cities alike. In Delphi, Greeks found a common ground, a place where the gods spoke to them not as Spartans or Athenians, but as one people. There were other moments when this unity was tested and found stronger than expected. When Persia loomed as a threat, with its vast armies and ambition to conquer the Greek world, the city-states faced a choice: to stand alone and be consumed, or to unite and fight as one. It was a choice fraught with hesitation and mistrust. Yet, against all odds, they came together. At Marathon, Salamis, and Plataea, they fought with a ferocity born not just of survival but of pride in who they were. The idea of Panhellenism was never a formal alliance or a political union. It was a fragile, shimmering thread connecting the cities, weaving their distinct identities into a tapestry of shared culture and purpose. It was present in the songs sung at feasts, the stories told around fires, and the moments of quiet recognition that, despite their differences, they were kin. Even in their rivalries, there was something profoundly Greek. When Athens and Sparta clashed in the Peloponnesian War, it was a tragedy not just for them but for all Greece. It was a reminder of how easily unity could crumble, how the same fierce independence that made Greece extraordinary could also be its undoing. Yet, even in their darkest moments, the shared identity remained. It was not just a matter of convenience but of belief, a belief that they were all descended from the same ancestors, shaped by the same land and sea, destined to carry forward the same legacy. When the trumpets of Olympia fell silent, and the athletes returned to their cities, the spirit of the games lingered. The olive crowns would wither, but the memory of those days in the sun, of the sacred truce, and of the gods' blessings, remained. It was a reminder of what Greece could be, a land of fierce warriors and brilliant thinkers, of independent cities bound by something greater than themselves. That idea, fleeting and fragile, was their greatest achievement. It was the soul of Greece, enduring through the ages, inspiring generations to look beyond their walls and see the world not as a collection of rivals but as a shared home, full of possibility and wonder. The earth trembled as the Persian army, vast as an ocean, marched toward Greece. The sun gleamed off their armor, the glint of countless spears and shields reflecting the promise of destruction. The ground beneath them was thick with the weight of history. They were not just soldiers, they were the shadow of an empire stretching from the Indus to the Aegean, seeking to extend its grasp even further. At the farthest edge of their world stood Greece, a collection of fiercely independent city-states, proud and defiant, oblivious to the storm that was about to crash down upon them. In the quiet of dawn, on the dusty plains of Marathon, the first battle was fought. The Greek forces, numbering just 10,000, stood like a wall of stone against a Persian army of tens of thousands. The odds seemed impossible. But they fought with everything they had, with the desperation of a people who knew that their survival depended not just on victory, but on their ability to hold on to something far greater than their own lives. With every thrust of the spear, every swing of the sword, they weren't just fighting for land, they were fighting for their freedom, their way of life, for the very essence of who they were. The air was thick with tension as the Persian forces charged forward. The ground was churned to mud, painted red with the blood of those who believed they would be the ones to decide the fate of Greece. Yet, against all expectations, the Greeks won. The Persian forces, shattered and stunned, turned and fled. The runners who carried the news of the victory back to Athens did not just bring words, they carried the pulse of a nation that had just, against all odds, stood up to the greatest empire the world had ever seen. But the war was not over. Soon, the shadows of the Persian Empire would fall upon the narrow pass of Thermopylae. 300 Spartans stood shoulder to shoulder with a handful of allies, staring into the endless line of Persian soldiers. It was not a battle they could win in the traditional sense. The Persians outnumbered them, their army a tide that seemed unstoppable. But the Spartans, led by King Leonidas, did not fight for victory in the way the world understood it. They fought for honor, for the spirit of Greece itself. The hot sun beat down on the warriors, but the cold certainty of their fate kept them standing. Their shields were locked, their spears poised. And when the Persian forces came charging at them, they held their ground, knowing that their sacrifice would inspire generations to come. The world watched as these 300 warriors fought with everything they had, refusing to yield, refusing to bow. They fell one by one, but their deaths were not in vain. Their bravery echoed through history, proving that even in the face of certain destruction, the spirit of a free people could never be extinguished. As the bodies of the fallen were carried off the battlefield, a sense of unity began to stir in Greece. For all their differences, Sparta with its discipline, Athens with its intellect, there was something deeper, something more profound that connected them all. The Persian threat had shown them that their strength lay not in their independence, but in their unity. They were Greeks, and no empire, no matter how vast, could erase that. The Battle of Thermopylae had been a tragedy, but it was also a spark. It lit a fire that would burn in the hearts of every Greek citizen, inspiring them to rise up in the face of the impossible. In the waters off Salamis, the Greeks would strike their next blow against the Persians. In the narrow straits, the Persian fleet, overconfident and vast, tried to trap the Greeks. But the Greeks, led by Themistocles, lured them into a trap. The Persian ships, large and cumbersome, were no match for the nimble Greek triremes. With a sudden and devastating attack, the Greeks shattered the Persian fleet, sending it into chaos and panic. The victory at Salamis was not just a military triumph. It was a victory of the spirit, a reminder that the Greeks, despite their differences, were a force to be reckoned with. The Persian Empire, so used to overwhelming all in its path, had been defeated not by raw numbers, but by the courage, the unity, and the brilliant strategy of a few determined city-states. When the dust settled, Greece stood victorious. The Persian threat was gone, but what remained was something more powerful than a military victory. It was the sense of a shared identity, of unity forged in the fires of war. For the first time, the cities of Greece, with their different values and ways of life, stood together as one. The gods had smiled upon them, yes, but it was their own courage, their own willingness to fight for something greater than themselves, that had brought them through. The impact of the Persian wars on Greek unity was profound. The war had turned rivals into allies, enemies into brothers. The Greeks understood now that their survival depended not on their individual strength, but on their collective will. The bonds that tied them together, woven through blood and sacrifice, were stronger than the divisions that had once separated them. The Persian Wars marked a turning point for Greece. They had faced an enemy that seemed unstoppable, and in doing so, they had discovered a strength within themselves that no one had known they possessed. It was a strength that would not only define their future but shape the course of history. The sun set over Athens, casting a golden hue on the bustling streets. The city, once scarred by war, now stood as a beacon of triumph, its heart pulsing with ambition. The sounds of craftsmen hammering and sculptors chiseling filled the air. People moved with purpose, their eyes reflecting a new sense of pride and possibility. Athens was no longer just a city, it was a symbol of what humanity could achieve when its people united with vision and drive. At the center of this golden age stood Pericles, a man whose words could stir crowds to action, whose wisdom seemed to shape the future with every decision. He walked among the people, not as a ruler towering above them, but as one who shared in their dreams and hopes. His vision for Athens was nothing short of monumental. He saw a city not just as a place to live, but as the very embodiment of civilization, a model for the world. Under his leadership, Athens transformed into an empire, its influence stretching across the seas. The Greek world looked to Athens not only for military might, but for guidance in art, philosophy, and government. Pericles' dream was clear: to build a city that would stand as a testament to the brilliance of the Greek people, a place where culture would flourish and the spirit of democracy would take root and thrive. To achieve this, he poured resources into the city's heart, the Acropolis. Standing at the foot of the mighty Parthenon, it was impossible to ignore the magnificence that was being created. Stone by stone, the great temple dedicated to Athena rose toward the sky, its columns tall and proud, each one meticulously crafted to reflect the beauty of the gods. The Parthenon was not just a building, it was a dream turned into stone, a symbol of the pride and power of Athens. Every day, thousands of workers labored under the burning sun, their sweat mingling with the dust of history. They knew they were building something that would endure for centuries, something that would speak to all who came after them of the greatness of their civilization. As the Parthenon took shape, it became more than a physical structure. It became a symbol of Athens' golden age, a city destined to leave a mark on the world. But Athens was not just about stone and marble. It was a city where art, literature, and ideas came to life. The theaters of Athens echoed with the voices of actors bringing tragedies and comedies to life. In the heart of the city, the great playwrights, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, wove tales that captured the depth of the human soul. These plays, staged in the open air, drew huge crowds who came not just for entertainment but for something deeper, an exploration of the very nature of life, of gods and men, of love and loss, of power and pride. The drama was no longer just about the gods, it was about humanity itself. The tragedies that gripped the hearts of audiences were stories of flawed heroes who soared to great heights only to fall, not because of the gods' will, but because of their own human weaknesses. It was in these moments of tragic beauty that the Athenians saw themselves. They understood that greatness came not just from victory, but from the willingness to confront the most painful truths of existence. On the stage, they saw their own lives reflected in the powerful words of the playwrights. The city's art, too, flourished during this time. Sculptors like Phidias, whose hand shaped the Parthenon's grand statue of Athena, breathed life into stone. The works of art in Athens were not merely decorative, they were a reflection of the ideals that defined the city. Harmony, balance, and beauty were not just principles of design, they were ideals that governed every aspect of Athenian life. The gods were idealized, yes, but so were the people of Athens. In their art, the Athenians saw themselves not as mere mortals, but as participants in a greater story, one that blended the divine with the human. At the heart of the city, the agora was alive with debate and discussion. Citizens, free men, gathered in the open air to share their thoughts on everything from politics to philosophy. Ideas flowed as freely as the wine. It was here that the seeds of democracy were planted, where men could stand and speak their minds, shaping the future of Athens with their words. Pericles' vision of democracy, where every citizen had a voice, was coming to life. Athens had become not just a place of power, but a place of ideas. In the bustling streets, where the great minds of the day mingled with the common folk, the ideals of democracy, reason, and progress flourished. The city pulsed with a sense of possibility, a belief that there was no limit to what they could achieve. Yet, this golden age was not without its challenges. The expansion of Athens into an empire came with its own burdens. Pericles' dream of a united, powerful Athens meant that not all would share in the city's glory. The tribute from the other Greek city-states flowed into Athens' coffers, fueling its power, but also creating divisions. Even as the city soared to new heights of achievement, the question remained, who truly benefited from this greatness? And yet, for the Athenians who walked those sun-drenched streets, who sat in the theaters and gazed up at the Parthenon, the Golden Age was a time of pride and joy. They had created something beautiful, something lasting. They had created a city where art, philosophy, and democracy could grow side by side. In their hearts, they believed that Athens was not just a city of stone, but a city of the mind, a place where the soul could soar and the human spirit could reach its highest potential. The Parthenon stood as the ultimate symbol of that belief. It was a tribute to Athena, yes, but it was also a tribute to the vision of Pericles and the greatness of Athens itself. A city built not just on the sweat of its laborers, but on the hopes and dreams of its people. The Golden Age of Athens was more than a period in history, it was a living, breathing testament to the potential of humanity when it is guided by vision, creativity, and a belief in the power of ideas. In the quiet stillness of the ancient world, a new kind of thinking began to stir. It wasn't the roar of armies or the triumph of kings that would change the course of history. It was the soft, persistent questioning of the world itself. People began to wonder not just about the gods and the stars, but about the very nature of life, existence, and knowledge. The questions they asked would ripple through time, shaping everything that came after. Thales of Miletus stood at the crossroads of myth and reason, asking what everything was made of. It was a simple question that sparked an idea so powerful it would echo through the centuries. Thales believed that water was the fundamental substance of all things. To many, it must have seemed a strange idea, water as the key to understanding the universe. But for Thales, it was a way of thinking that pushed beyond the limits of the old myths and ventured into the realm of reason. He didn't need divine voices or supernatural explanations. He believed that nature itself held the answers. And with that belief, the seeds of philosophy were planted. Soon after, Heraclitus, the philosopher from Ephesus, would challenge everything Thales had thought. "You cannot step into the same river twice," he said, suggesting that the world was in a constant state of change. His words were like a thunderclap in a quiet field, shaking the foundations of how people saw the world. Heraclitus saw everything, as fleeting, a continuous flow of change. To him, there was no permanence, no finality. His thoughts carved out a new space for understanding existence itself, one in which change was not an enemy to be feared, but a constant to be embraced. Then there was Pythagoras, whose name lives on not just in philosophy but in mathematics as well. He saw the universe in numbers and believed that harmony could be found in the way numbers and shapes interacted. The Pythagorean theorem, something as simple as a right triangle's sides, would forever change how humanity understood geometry. But Pythagoras' thinking was more than just about numbers. He saw the world as an intricate web of relationships, a universe governed by a hidden order, where mathematics and philosophy merged into one. These early thinkers laid the groundwork, but the true flowering of Greek philosophy came with the towering figures of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. The very foundation of Western thought rests on their shoulders. Socrates, more than a teacher, was a revolutionary. He wandered the streets of Athens, asking questions, questioning everything. He didn't provide answers, he invited others to think for themselves. His method, known as the Socratic method, was simple but profound. He would ask question after question, drawing out answers, testing their logic, and leading his students into deeper and deeper layers of thought. In a time when many followed the teachings of the great philosophers as though they were the final word, Socrates made people realize that wisdom was not about knowing answers, it was about asking the right questions. "Know thyself," he said. But how could anyone know themselves without first questioning everything they thought they knew? Socrates' influence on the world was immense, but it was his student Plato who would carry his teacher's legacy even further. Plato's mind was a vast, uncharted ocean, and in his works, he reached into the deepest parts of existence. He thought not only about the world we see, but also about the world we can't see, the world of forms, perfect and eternal. Plato believed that everything we see in the world around us is just a shadow, an imperfect reflection of something greater. For Plato, the true reality existed beyond the senses, in a realm of pure ideas. His writings are as beautiful as they are complex, and in them, he explored everything from politics to the nature of love to the soul's journey after death. Through Plato's dialogues, we come to understand that knowledge is not just about gathering facts, it's about understanding the very nature of truth itself. But it was Aristotle, Plato's most famous student, who would shape the future of philosophy, science, and education. Unlike Plato, Aristotle believed in studying the world around him, not just in contemplating abstract ideals. He believed that the key to understanding the world lay in observation, in looking at nature, and in drawing conclusions based on what could be seen and experienced. His influence would touch everything, from logic to biology, from ethics to politics. Aristotle's teachings would lay the foundation for nearly every field of knowledge in the centuries that followed. His works were vast, his curiosity endless. If Plato was a dreamer, Aristotle was a grounded visionary, seeking answers in the real world. These thinkers, the ones who dared to ask questions, who sought to understand the world with their minds, did more than just change the course of Greek history. They changed the course of human history. Through them, the idea was born that knowledge could be discovered, not by divine revelation or myth, but through reason, observation, and inquiry. Their influence seeped into the minds of future generations, shaping the way the Western world thought about the universe and their place within it. And so, the birth of philosophy marked the beginning of something new, something entirely human. It was the birth of the idea that we could seek truth not from the gods, but from within ourselves. The philosophy of these early thinkers would inspire generations of scholars, revolutionizing the way we think about life, ethics, and knowledge. These ideas would carry on through the Roman Empire, through the Renaissance, and into the modern world. But the true power of these thinkers lies not just in the answers they gave, but in the questions they asked. They showed humanity the power of thought, the power of the mind to transcend what is visible and question the very foundations of existence. It was their pursuit of truth that would echo across time, and their legacy would become the foundation of the world we know today. It was a quiet moment under the stars when humanity first began to reach for the mysteries of the universe. In a world where gods ruled the skies and nature was seen as a divine force, there came a spark, a small yet powerful idea, to understand the world not by myth or prayer, but by observation and thought. Ancient Greece became the birthplace of a new kind of thinking, a revolution that would forever change the course of human history. In the fields of mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, the Greeks began to grasp concepts that seemed far beyond the reach of any civilization before them. Their thirst for knowledge was not just driven by curiosity, it was driven by a profound belief that the universe was knowable. They saw the world not as a chaotic swirl of unpredictable forces, but as a place governed by rules, patterns, and logic. And with this belief, they set out to uncover these secrets, to map the stars, to understand the body, and to give meaning to the very numbers that held the world together. Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, changed the way we think about health and disease. Before him, sickness was seen as the result of divine punishment or supernatural forces. But Hippocrates turned this thinking on its head. He believed that disease was a natural occurrence, a result of imbalances in the body, and that it could be cured through observation and treatment based on nature, rather than divine intervention. His approach was revolutionary. He urged doctors to trust their observations and to treat the patient, not just the symptoms. The Hippocratic Oath, a promise to do no harm, became a fundamental principle that doctors still swear by today. And then there was Euclid, whose work in geometry would lay the foundation for all of mathematics. His most famous work, Elements, was a comprehensive collection of the knowledge of geometry at the time, written in such a clear and logical manner that it would remain the standard textbook for over 2,000 years. Euclid's approach to mathematics was methodical and precise, based on simple axioms and logical reasoning. His work showed that through systematic thinking, one could unravel the mysteries of the shapes, angles, and relationships that governed the world around us. The elegance of his logic and the simplicity of his proofs demonstrated that math was not just a tool for counting, but a way to understand the very fabric of the universe itself. But it was Archimedes, the brilliant inventor and mathematician, who became the shining star in the Greek scientific revolution. With his discoveries, he gave the world tools that would lay the foundation for everything from engineering to physics. Archimedes was the first to understand the principle of buoyancy and explained why objects float in water, an observation that would later form the basis for modern fluid dynamics. He invented the screw that could raise water, an invention still used today in irrigation. His works in geometry, including the measurement of a circle's area and the calculation of pi, were so advanced that they remained unparalleled for centuries. Archimedes was not just a scientist, but a visionary who saw the potential of science and mathematics to change the world. These figures, Hippocrates, Euclid, Archimedes, were not isolated minds working in a vacuum. They were part of a broader cultural movement, where empirical observation and philosophical reasoning merged in ways that had never been seen before. They were thinkers who didn't just accept the world as it was. They questioned, observed, experimented, and reasoned. For the Greeks, science wasn't a dry, impersonal pursuit. It was an extension of their philosophy, a way of understanding the deeper meaning of life and existence. They saw no contradiction between asking why and how. For them, science was the means through which philosophy could reach its fullest potential. As they studied the stars above, the Greeks discovered that the universe wasn't an unpredictable, chaotic force. It had patterns, it followed rules, and it was waiting to be understood. Their contributions in astronomy were just as groundbreaking. The Greeks were among the first to propose that the Earth was a sphere, not flat, and that the Earth itself rotated around the Sun. Their careful observations of the stars and the movements of the planets, while rudimentary by today's standards, were the first steps in a journey that would take humanity to the moon and beyond. But this merging of observation and reason wasn't just about discovering the physical world. The Greeks sought to understand the very laws of nature, to trace the invisible threads that held the universe together. Their study of medicine was not just about curing the body, but understanding the intricate balance that made life possible. Their mathematical discoveries were not merely numbers and shapes on a page, but keys to unlock the mysteries of the cosmos. To them, knowledge wasn't an isolated pursuit. It was a way of connecting with the world and finding beauty in its design. Yet, despite their remarkable advances, the Greeks didn't consider themselves the final word. They saw knowledge as a continuous pursuit, a journey with no end. The way they approached the world was not as conquerors, but as humble learners, constantly questioning, seeking, and refining their understanding. In their scientific and philosophical pursuits, they understood that wisdom was a shared endeavor, a conversation between the past, the present, and the future. And in this, they set the stage for everything that would come after them. From Hippocrates, we learned that the body can be healed not through divine powers, but through understanding and care. From Euclid, we learned that the world could be mapped with logic and numbers, and from Archimedes, we learned that the world could be changed with the application of those principles. These men were not just thinkers, they were dreamers who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be, and in their work, they unlocked the potential of science to reshape human civilization. Their legacy is not just in the discoveries they made, but in the way they taught us to think. They didn't give us all the answers, but they gave us the tools to seek them out. The Greeks didn't just look at the world, they looked for patterns, they searched for meaning, and they gave us a way to understand ourselves and the universe. What they left behind was more than just knowledge, it was a new way of seeing the world, one that still drives us today. The sound of marching feet echoed across the land, a thunderous reminder of the great clash that was about to unfold. It wasn't just a battle between two powerful cities, it was a war that would tear apart the very heart of Greece. The Peloponnesian War, a conflict that stretched across decades, began not with a single battle, but with the slow, simmering tension between Athens and Sparta, two cities that represented the extremes of Greek society. Athens, the brilliant city-state where democracy flourished and art, philosophy, and innovation blossomed, was at odds with Sparta, a city built on discipline, strength, and an unyielding military code. For years, both cities had watched each other with suspicion, their differences growing wider as Athens' power and influence spread. The seeds of conflict were planted as Athens' ambitions expanded, and Sparta, fearing a loss of its dominance, felt its way of life was under threat. It started small. Athens, under the leadership of Pericles, sought to extend its influence over the Greek world. It was a time of cultural and intellectual brilliance, but with prosperity came power, and with power came the jealousy of others. The Delian League, originally formed to protect Greece from Persia, became a tool of Athenian supremacy, drawing the ire of Sparta and its allies. Meanwhile, Sparta, with its military might and disciplined society, looked upon Athens as a city of decadence, soft in its comforts and indulgence, a threat to the Spartan ideal of strength and simplicity. Tensions escalated, and soon the words of diplomacy were drowned out by the sound of war drums. It wasn't just a battle for control of land, it was a struggle for the soul of Greece itself. Athens, with its navy and wealth, was determined to expand its influence. Sparta, with its iron-willed soldiers and land-based power, was equally determined to maintain its supremacy. The clash of these two giants would define an era. As the war unfolded, both sides suffered unimaginable losses. In the early years, Athens was struck by a devastating plague, wiping out a significant portion of its population, including the beloved Pericles himself. The city, once vibrant and full of life, seemed to lose its spark. Yet even in the face of such despair, Athens fought on, its people determined to hold onto their vision of democracy and progress. Meanwhile, Sparta, with its relentless military machine, made its mark. The Spartan warriors, trained from childhood in the agoge, were fierce and disciplined, unmatched on the battlefield. They were a symbol of strength, the embodiment of a way of life that valued sacrifice, unity, and the warrior code. Yet even Sparta, so sure of its superiority, could not escape the toll of endless war. The Spartan way of life, based on its strict and demanding military culture, began to show cracks as the war dragged on. The battles were brutal, no mercy was shown on either side. The siege of Plataea, the destruction of Melos, the naval battles, and the desperate attempts to break the enemies became moments of unimaginable loss and sacrifice. Each battle seemed to mark a turning point, yet none brought finality. Each side believed in its cause, each saw itself as the rightful protector of Greek civilization, and yet each was slowly and painfully being ground down by the unrelenting conflict. The war had already lasted longer than anyone had hoped, but it was the final, desperate years that would change everything. Athens, weakened by internal strife and external pressures, fought a final battle for survival. It was no longer just about winning, it was about holding on to everything that made Athens great, its ideals, its democracy, its way of life. The Spartan-led alliance, having endured its own wounds, was now determined to bring Athens to its knees. The people who once stood side by side in the name of Greek unity were now enemies, their shared culture and history twisted by hatred and mistrust. The consequences were staggering. When the war finally ended in 404 BCE, it left Greece broken. Athens, the city that had once been the jewel of the ancient world, was humbled, its walls torn down, its democracy crushed. Sparta, too, had lost much of its strength, its military might proving insufficient to restore the unity of the Greek world. The idea of Greek unity, once so strong, seemed like a distant dream. The war, however, did not just change Athens and Sparta, it changed the way the Greeks viewed themselves. The Peloponnesian War laid bare the weaknesses of both city-states and revealed the dark side of war, one where ideals were sacrificed for power, and where the thirst for victory overshadowed the very things that had made Greece great in the first place. The ideals of democracy and the glory of the warriors seemed hollow in the aftermath, and Greece, once unified by a shared love for culture and philosophy, found itself divided and weakened. The scars of the Peloponnesian War were not just physical, they were deeply emotional, etched into the collective memory of the Greek people. It was a war that tested the very essence of Greek identity. Could democracy and the warrior code coexist? Could the pursuit of knowledge and art survive when the world was engulfed by conflict and destruction? The Greek civilization, which had once stood at the pinnacle of human achievement, now faced a future uncertain and fragmented. In the end, the Peloponnesian War was not just a story of Athens and Sparta, it was a story of human pride, ambition, and the cost of conflict. It showed the fragility of the ideals that we hold dear and the devastating effects of war on those who fight for them. The bloodshed, the sacrifice, the endless struggles, these would forever shape the course of Greek history, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of its people. The echoes of this war, with all its pain and loss, would live on in the lessons learned from it. The Greeks, in their pursuit of greatness, had been reminded of the cost of division and the price of hubris. And even as the city-states of Greece fell apart, the spirit of their culture, their art, their philosophy, their wisdom, would eventually rise again, though forever altered by the scars of the Peloponnesian War. The sound of armor clinking echoed through the grand halls of Pella, the heart of Macedon. The once fractured lands of Greece, divided by endless rivalry and suspicion, now found themselves under the iron grip of a man who would change everything. His name was Philip II, and his vision stretched far beyond the borders of his own kingdom. His ambition was clear: to unite the Greeks, to forge a new destiny for a fractured people, and to bring them under one banner. Philip was no stranger to the ways of war. A brilliant strategist and a master of diplomacy, he saw the potential in the Greek city-states, but also their weaknesses. The constant infighting, the pride of Athens, the militaristic hold of Sparta, the shifting allegiances, it had weakened them all. Philip, with his keen mind and unmatched skill, sought to forge a united kingdom from this chaos. And so, through cunning alliances and brutal battles, he began to pull the fractured pieces of Greece together. As his forces marched through the Greek world, it became clear that Philip's vision was more than just a dream, it was a revolution. The Greek city-states, once proud and independent, could not stand alone in the face of his relentless ambition. One by one, they fell. The Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE marked the culmination of Philip's campaign. It was here that the Greek world finally submitted, and the Macedonian king became the master of a united Greece. But Philip's triumph would be short-lived. A shadow of fate, cruel and swift, cast a dark cloud over the victory he had earned. Philip was assassinated, leaving behind a kingdom on the brink of greatness, and a son who would inherit his father's vision, though perhaps not in the way anyone could have imagined. That son was Alexander, a young man whose fire burned brighter than the greatest warriors of his time. At the age of just 20, Alexander ascended to the throne, inheriting a unified Greece and a father's ambition. His heart was not content with simply ruling the lands his father had conquered. No, Alexander looked beyond the borders of Greece. He dreamed of empires and kingdoms stretching across continents, of worlds unknown. He was not a mere king, he was a force of nature. And so began the story of one of the greatest conquerors in history. With a heart full of fire and a mind sharper than any sword, Alexander led his army through unimaginable hardships. His army, though smaller than the mighty Persian empires, was fierce and loyal, bound together by a shared dream of glory and greatness. With every victory, Alexander's legend grew. The Battle of Granicus, the Siege of Tyre, and the legendary crossing of the Hindu Kush, all these battles marked the relentless expansion of his empire. But it wasn't just the size of his conquests that set Alexander apart. It was the vision he had for the world. Unlike many conquerors, who sought only to rule and divide, Alexander sought to spread Greek culture far and wide. He didn't just want to conquer, he wanted to weave together a tapestry of cultures, a world united by a shared language, a shared way of thinking. In the cities he founded, Alexandria in Egypt, for instance, he spread Greek art, philosophy, and science, creating centers of learning that would influence the world for centuries to come. Yet, as brilliant as Alexander was on the battlefield, he was just as flawed in his humanity. He was driven by an insatiable desire for more land, more power, more glory. His campaign continued into India, where he met resistance unlike any he had faced before. It was here, in the forests and mountains of the east, that Alexander's army began to question the limits of their king's ambition. Exhausted, broken, and longing for home, they refused to march further into the unknown. Alexander, ever determined, was forced to turn back, the dream of reaching the ends of the world fading like a mirage. As he made his way back to Babylon, Alexander's mind was consumed not by the thought of his empire, but by something else, a feeling that perhaps his conquests had come at a terrible cost. The man who had conquered worlds had no heirs, and no clear path for the future. It was in this moment, with his empire stretching from Greece to India, that Alexander fell ill and died, at the age of just 32. In the wake of his death, his empire fractured. His generals, the very men who had followed him to the ends of the earth, fought amongst themselves for control. The unity Alexander had so carefully built began to crumble, and the vast empire he had created was divided into smaller kingdoms, each ruled by a different successor. But despite his early death, Alexander's legacy endured. The Hellenistic world that he had created did not fade into obscurity. Instead, it became a lasting influence on the cultures it touched. Greek culture, philosophy, and art spread throughout the lands Alexander had conquered, leaving behind a legacy that would shape the ancient world for centuries. The cities he founded became hubs of knowledge and culture, places where Eastern and Western ideas could meet and blend. The language of Alexander, Greek, became the lingua franca of much of the ancient world, allowing the ideas of thinkers like Aristotle to echo across continents. What made Alexander so remarkable was not just his military genius or his ambition, it was his vision of a world brought together by culture, learning, and understanding. He saw the possibilities of a world where different peoples could unite, not through force, but through shared values and ideals. His conquests, though violent, carried with them the seeds of a new world order, a world where Greek culture could be a unifying force for diverse peoples, where philosophy, science, and art could transcend borders and time. As the years passed, the world Alexander created would fracture and change, but his vision, the idea of a world connected by knowledge and shared culture, would endure. The world may have moved on from the empire he built, but the influence of Hellenistic culture, spread by his conquests, would continue to shape the world long after his death. The world was changing, and the winds of transformation blew like a powerful storm across the lands. The ancient walls of Alexandria, once silent and empty, now hummed with life, echoing with the voices of scholars, merchants, and travelers from every corner of the known world. These walls had seen it all, the clash of empires, the birth of great ideas, and the mixing of cultures that had once been strangers to each other. This was the Hellenistic world, where the boundaries between East and West blurred, where the influence of Greece fused with the ancient wisdom of the East, creating something new, something breathtaking. Alexander's empire had shattered, but in the space left behind, something remarkable had begun to grow. It was as though the seeds of his vision, planted in the fertile soil of faraway lands, were now blooming into a magnificent garden. The blending of Greek and Eastern cultures was not just a mere fusion, it was a marriage of ideas, of art, of science, and philosophy. The cities Alexander had founded and conquered were becoming living symbols of a new world, where Greek ideals mingled with the ancient traditions of Egypt, Persia, and India. People from different backgrounds found common ground through shared knowledge, exchanging not only goods, but also ideas that would shape the future. In the streets of cities like Alexandria, the air was thick with possibilities. Greek scholars stood side by side with Egyptian priests, Persian mathematicians, and Indian astronomers. For the first time, the barriers between cultures were no longer walls but bridges. Here, knowledge was free, open to all who sought it. The Library of Alexandria, the greatest treasure of the Hellenistic world, stood as a beacon of this new age, a place where scrolls containing the wisdom of countless civilizations were gathered, preserved, and studied by the greatest minds of the time. It was not just a library, it was the heart of an intellectual revolution. In this world, art flourished in ways that had never been seen before. Greek sculptors, once obsessed with perfecting the human form, now began to experiment with new ideas. The rigid ideals of classical Greek art, where beauty was defined by balance and harmony, gave way to the more emotional and dramatic expressions of the Hellenistic period. Statues like the Laocoon and his sons and the winged victory of Samothrace captured not only the human body but the soul within it, the agony, the struggle, the triumph. These works, with their flowing lines and powerful emotion, were a direct reflection of the age in which they were created, an age of turmoil, of conquest, and of blending cultures into something more complex than ever before. But it wasn't just in art that the Hellenistic world thrived. Science and philosophy too underwent a transformation that would forever change the course of human history. Greek thinkers, inspired by the wisdom they encountered in the lands Alexander had conquered, began to look at the world in new and exciting ways. The great mathematician Euclid wrote his Elements, laying the foundation for geometry as we know it today. Archimedes, the genius from Syracuse, made discoveries in mechanics and mathematics that still resonate in modern science. His inventions, like the screw and the lever, were not just tools, they were symbols of how the Hellenistic world sought to understand the forces of nature itself. At the same time, the philosophers of the era grappled with questions that still echo in our minds today. The Stoics, like Zeno of Citium, taught that happiness could be found through virtue and self-control, while the Epicureans, led by Epicurus, argued that pleasure, specifically mental pleasure, was the highest good. In the streets and forums of cities like Athens, Rhodes, and Alexandria, philosophers debated these ideas, trying to understand what it meant to live a good life in a world that was now so much larger, so much more interconnected than it had been before. This era of intellectual and artistic flourishing was also one of great change in the political landscape. The grand empires Alexander had created did not last, and the vast territories were divided among his generals, the Diadochi, who fought each other for control. Yet, even amid this instability, the cultural exchange continued. The remnants of Greek philosophy and art lived on, thriving in the new Hellenistic kingdoms, such as those in Egypt, Syria, and Asia Minor. These new rulers saw the value in Greek culture, and they patronized the arts, building grand temples and theaters, and encouraging scholarship. Even as the political order shifted, the cultural legacy of Alexander's conquests endured, becoming part of the very fabric of the ancient world. The cities that emerged in the wake of Alexander's empire became centers of culture, trade, and knowledge. Alexandria, in particular, stood as a shining example of this new world. It was here that the great thinkers of the age came together, where scholars from Egypt, Greece, Persia, and beyond exchanged ideas and created something truly unique. The library that housed countless scrolls and the museum that served as a center of learning became the intellectual heart of the Mediterranean. Knowledge was not confined to a single culture or place, it was shared and celebrated, leading to advancements in everything from medicine to astronomy. Yet, despite all the advances of the Hellenistic world, there was a sense of longing, a bittersweet realization that the golden age of Alexander was slipping away. The dreams of unity, of a single, vast empire that spanned east and west, began to crumble. The kingdoms that rose in the wake of his death were fractured, their rulers more concerned with power and wealth than with the vision Alexander had inspired. But even in the face of this fragmentation, the cultural and intellectual achievements of the Hellenistic period endured. The blending of Greek and Eastern cultures had given birth to a new way of thinking, one that transcended borders and empires. In the cities of the Hellenistic world, knowledge flourished, and the arts reached new heights. This was an age where East met West, where cultures mingled and created something far greater than the sum of its parts. And though the world would change again, though new empires would rise and fall, the legacy of the Hellenistic period, the blending of ideas, the search for knowledge, the expression of human emotion and thought, would continue to inspire generations to come. A figure stands before you, frozen in time. Its muscles are defined with such precision, each curve and line sculpted to perfection, capturing the very essence of human strength and grace. The statue's eyes seem to gaze into the distance, not lost in thought, but with purpose, as if contemplating the vast universe itself. This was no ordinary creation, it was the work of a Greek artist, one whose vision would echo through the centuries. This was the art that not only defined an era, but would go on to shape the very way we perceive beauty, humanity, and expression. The Greeks didn't just create art, they created a legacy. In their hands, stone became more than just rock, clay more than just earth. They gave life to inanimate materials, transforming them into something that not only depicted the human form, but also revealed the soul within. Greek sculpture, with its focus on idealized beauty and human perfection, set a standard that would be revered for millennia. The Greeks, for all their philosophical brilliance, understood something profound about the body and the mind. Their statues weren't just about symmetry or proportions, they were about capturing the divine spirit that existed within every human. Every curve, every line, every pose was calculated to evoke emotion, to make the viewer feel as though the figure might step down from its pedestal and into the world. The most famous of these masterpieces, the Discobolus, the Venus de Milo, the Dorophoros, are more than just representations of physical beauty. They are windows into the heart of Greek culture, where the human body wasn't just a vessel, but a symbol of strength, wisdom, and balance. But it wasn't just the monumental sculptures that spoke to the Greek understanding of life and beauty. Pottery, too, became a canvas for expressing the everyday, the divine, and the mythical. Greek pottery, with its flowing lines and intricate designs, told stories. Every vase, every bowl, every pitcher was more than a practical object, it was a piece of art. The black figure and red figure techniques, where images of gods, heroes, and everyday people danced across the surfaces, conveyed not just moments of action, but entire narratives. The way warriors were depicted, mid-battle or in quiet moments of reflection, or the way gods descended from Mount Olympus, surrounded by mythic creatures, showed a society deeply in tune with its own stories, dreams, and struggles. In the graceful curves of a kylix or the geometric elegance of an amphora, there was a deep reflection of Greek ideals, harmony, proportion, and the pursuit of perfection. Pottery wasn't just a form of decoration, it was a testament to how the Greeks saw the world around them, beautiful, balanced, and full of life. The images on these pots may seem simple at first glance, but they hold within them the stories that have shaped the very essence of Western civilization, stories of heroism, love, and betrayal, of gods and men struggling for meaning in a vast, uncertain world. Yet, it was in architecture that the Greeks left their most lasting mark on history. The majestic temples that rose from the earth, crowned by columns, seemed to embody the very ideals of Greek society: order, beauty, and proportion. The Parthenon, with its towering columns and intricate sculptures, was not just a place of worship. It was an expression of everything the Greeks believed in. It stood as a testament to their devotion to the gods, to the city-state of Athens, and to the ideals of democracy and freedom that defined their way of life. Its grandeur was matched only by its precision, as though every stone was placed with the utmost care, as if the gods themselves might be watching. The architectural wonders of ancient Greece were more than just buildings. They were symbols of a civilization that saw beauty in every detail and every corner of life. The Greek orders, the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, became the foundation for all Western architecture that followed. The straight lines of Doric columns, the elegance of the Ionic, and the ornate beauty of the Corinthian, all these became the language through which generations of architects would communicate their reverence for the human spirit and the divine. The Greeks were not content to simply create for the sake of creating. They were driven by something deeper, something almost spiritual. Their art and architecture were expressions of their worldview, reflections of their beliefs about the universe, about human nature, and about the gods who watched over them. They didn't just build or sculpt, they reached for something higher, something eternal. In their temples and statues, in their pottery and paintings, they sought to capture the essence of life itself, to make the fleeting moments of human existence eternal. As the centuries passed, the Romans, inheritors of much of Greek culture, would look to Greek art and architecture for inspiration. The statues that once graced the streets of Athens would be replicated in marble in Rome. The columns and arches that stood proud in Greek cities would form the backbone of Roman temples, baths, and amphitheaters. The grandeur of Greek art would find its way into the hearts of generations of Western artists, from the Renaissance masters to the sculptors of the neoclassical period. The influence of Greek art and architecture is so deeply embedded in our cultural consciousness that it's impossible to imagine a world without it. Yet, the Greeks themselves never sought immortality. They were driven not by the idea of creating something that would last forever, but by the desire to create something beautiful, something that spoke to the very heart of what it meant to be human. They wanted to capture the fleeting, the divine, and the human in a single stroke, a single curve, a single moment frozen in time, and so, the statues stand, the pots are displayed, and the ruins of their temples rise from the earth, speaking to us from a world long gone. Through their art, the Greeks gave us more than just the beauty of their time. They gave us a way to see the world through their eyes, a way to appreciate the grace and simplicity, the perfection and imperfection, and the power of the human spirit to create, to endure, and to dream. The theater was alive with anticipation, the air thick with the murmurs of an eager crowd. The flickering light of torches danced across the faces of the spectators, their eyes fixed on the stage before them. The drums began, the orchestra stirring, and in an instant, the actors emerged, their faces painted with the raw emotions of their characters. A hush fell over the crowd as the story began, and in those moments, the world of the play seemed to spill out and wrap around the audience, pulling them into a world of gods, heroes, and impossible choices. The power of the Greek stage wasn't in its elaborate sets or grand costumes, it was in the way the drama spoke to something deep inside, something shared by everyone who ever felt the weight of fate or the sting of loss. The ancient Greeks had a gift for capturing the essence of human experience and turning it into something that could make you laugh and cry in the same breath. Their plays weren't just performances, they were reflections of the struggles that defined the very heart of life. They spoke to the fears that haunted every person, the joys that made life worth living, and the questions that still linger in the shadows of every civilization. Aeschylus, the towering figure of early Greek drama, knew how to stir the soul. His tragedies were the ones that echoed the deepest. He was a master of the stage, an artist who could show a world where the gods themselves were caught in a struggle with fate. His plays didn't just tell stories, they shaped the very fabric of human existence, where every choice carried weight, every action had consequence. When his characters stood before the gods, or before each other, their words held the power of 1,000 storms. They were not just talking, they were facing the overwhelming forces of life and death. Then came Sophocles, whose name was whispered with reverence. He built upon Aeschylus's foundation but carried the torch higher, casting light on the tragic hero's journey with such clarity that his stories seemed to pierce the heart of what it meant to be human. His Oedipus Rex stands as one of the most powerful tragedies ever written. There was something universal about Oedipus's fall from greatness, his blindness to the truth, his slow unraveling of fate. It was the perfect storm of human pride, ignorance, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge, and every word in the play seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 lifetimes. Watching Oedipus confront the truth was like watching a man stripped bare, his flaws exposed for all to see, and you couldn't help but feel the sharp sting of his realization in your own soul. Sophocles didn't just write plays, he wrote lessons about life, about the things we cannot control, about the limits of human understanding. His heroes weren't invincible. They were flawed, and in their flaws, they became more real. They were the perfect reflection of humanity, struggling, questioning, always searching for something beyond their reach. When Oedipus looks out into the darkness, his agony is our agony. It is the agony of every person who has ever made a mistake they can never undo, who has ever sought redemption they may never find. But then, there was Euripides, a poet who dared to ask the hard questions. His works didn't simply ask us to mourn the gods and heroes, they asked us to consider the complexity of the human heart. Euripides introduced a new kind of drama, one that saw the gods not as omnipotent figures, but as beings who, like humans, were driven by jealousy, anger, and whim. His characters were no longer just the mighty kings or noble warriors. They were real people, caught in the grip of emotions they couldn't always understand or control. In Medea, the title character's fury becomes a force of nature, a destructive power that consumes everyone in its path. Watching Medea's spiral into vengeance, you see the breaking of something deep and fragile within her. And yet, in her eyes, there's a reflection of something you can't quite name, an understanding of pain, of betrayal, that feels all too familiar. Euripides pushed the boundaries of Greek theater, challenging the gods, the heroes, and even the audience to see beyond the surface. His plays made you uncomfortable. They made you question the nature of justice, love, and morality. And in that discomfort, you found something raw, something human. In the complex, twisted relationships he portrayed, there was a recognition that life isn't always black and white. That sometimes, the monster is in the heart, not in the gods above. But just as the tragedies revealed the darkest corners of the human soul, there was also room for laughter. Enter Aristophanes, the master of comedy, whose sharp wit and satire could pierce through the heaviest of moments like a burst of sunlight. Aristophanes used humor not to diminish the struggles of life, but to expose the absurdities within them. His plays were filled with ridiculous characters, outlandish scenarios, and biting social commentary. In Lysistrata, a group of women band together to end the Peloponnesian War, not through violence, but through withholding something far more powerful, their love. Aristophanes saw the foolishness of war, of politics, and of human vanity, and he used the stage to make us laugh at the very things we often refuse to question. There was power in laughter, just as there was power in sorrow. Aristophanes knew that humor could disarm us, that it could make us see the flaws in our own behavior, our own thinking, with a new light. His comedies didn't just entertain, they made us think, laugh, and then think again. They reminded us that life wasn't only about tragedy and doom, it was about the ability to laugh at ourselves, to find joy even in the midst of chaos. Greek drama was more than just a form of entertainment. It was a lens through which the Greeks saw their world. It was a mirror held up to society, reflecting not just the gods or kings, but the people, ordinary, flawed, desperate, and sometimes heroic. It was an art form that could make you feel the weight of a decision, the sting of betrayal, or the joy of a shared laugh. And in that feeling, you saw yourself, your own fears, dreams, and longings. The plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes didn't just tell stories, they told the story of humanity. And when the curtain fell, the impact didn't fade. It stayed with you, echoing in your heart long after the applause died down. There was a moment, early in the history of Athens, when the people gathered in the heart of the city, their voices rising in unison as they demanded a voice in their own future. The marketplace buzzed with the energy of those who believed that power should not belong to a select few, but to the many. For the first time, a dream was born that was as revolutionary as it was simple, that ordinary citizens, not just kings or aristocrats, should have a say in the way their lives were governed. It was a moment of reckoning, one that would echo for centuries to come. The birth of democracy in Athens was not an easy thing. It did not come without struggle, without bloodshed, or without sacrifice. But when the first citizens gathered in the assembly to voice their opinions, to make decisions that would shape their city, something profound happened. They stood together, not as subjects of a ruler, but as equals, united by the idea that their voices mattered. This idea was not just a political experiment, it was a dream that transcended time. For centuries, the concept of democracy seemed impossible. But in the streets of Athens, in the minds of philosophers and ordinary men, it became something real, something that could be practiced. It was here that the notion of political equality, of rule by the people, took root. And the idea would change the world forever. The city of Athens, once home to philosophers and artists, became the birthplace of an entirely new way of thinking about power and justice. Under the leadership of Solon, Cleisthenes, and Pericles, Athens forged a path that would alter the course of history. These leaders saw the potential of the people, and they laid the groundwork for a government in which each voice had the power to shape the future. But that power didn't come easily. It was earned through hardship, through rebellion, and through the tireless work of those who fought for a system that represented the collective will, not the desires of the few. The assembly was where the decisions were made. Men from all walks of life gathered in this sacred space to debate, to argue, and to make laws that would impact everyone. It was not a perfect system, far from it. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded from the democratic process, and many voices were silenced. But for the first time, the notion of political equality existed. It wasn't something abstract, it was something people fought for, something they bled for. The seeds of democracy had been sown. As the years went on, the influence of Athens and its revolutionary system of government spread. The democratic ideals that had flourished in the shadow of the Parthenon became a model for future generations. Leaders like Pericles championed the rights of the people, reminding them that the strength of Athens lay in the power of its citizens. His vision was clear, a government that relied on the will of the people, a city where every voice, no matter how small, had the power to shape its destiny. But Athens was not the only city where these ideas took root. In the years that followed, the spirit of Greek governance spread throughout the world. Even as empires rose and fell, as kings and emperors claimed the thrones of distant lands, the idea of democracy continued to inspire. In the far reaches of the Roman Empire, in the courts of Renaissance Europe, and in the hearts of revolutionaries across the world, the idea of self-rule, of government by the people, lived on. What began in Athens was not a fleeting moment in history, it was a spark that lit the flame of freedom across the ages. The echoes of Athenian democracy can still be heard today. The systems that govern our world, our governments, our courts, our assemblies, owe much to the principles laid down in ancient Greece. The idea that power should come from the people, that every citizen deserves a voice, has shaped the way we think about justice, fairness, and equality. We are the heirs of that dream, of those who dared to believe that governments should exist to serve the people, not the other way around. In modern times, the lessons of Greece still shape our world. The U.S. Constitution, the French Revolution, the rise of parliamentary systems, all these movements were inspired by the dream of democracy first realized on the steps of the Athenian Agora. The voices of citizens, of the common man, who once could only whisper their desires, are now the voices that echo in the halls of power. We stand today as the heirs of that ancient vision, the inheritors of a system that was born out of struggle, built on the belief that the people have the right to govern themselves. But even now, as we stand in the shadow of ancient Athens, we know the work is never done. The dream of democracy is a living, breathing thing. It evolves, it faces challenges, and it asks us to question whether we are truly living up to the ideals that were set down so long ago. Are all voices heard? Are all people truly equal? The spirit of Greek governance calls to us, urging us to continue the work that began so many centuries ago, to carry the torch forward, and to ensure that the will of the people is always respected. As we reflect on the legacy of Greek governance, we feel the weight of their ambition, their sacrifice, and their vision. It was in the streets of Athens that the dream of self-rule was first realized, and that dream continues to shape our world today. We are reminded, as we look back, that the fight for democracy is not over. It is a journey, one that we must continue with every generation, as we strive to build a world where every voice is heard, and every person's dignity is honored. The past lives on in the decisions we make, in the systems we build, and in the hearts of those who still believe in the power of the people. It is a legacy that will never fade, because it is the legacy of all humanity, of our shared desire for justice, for fairness, and for the right to shape our own futures. And as we stand on the shoulders of the ancient Greeks, we are reminded that the dream of democracy is not a distant memory, it is a living, breathing promise that we must hold dear, now and always. There's a truth we often overlook as we go about our daily lives. So much of what we take for granted today, our thoughts, our government systems, the way we think about the world, was shaped in the bustling streets, quiet corners, and sunlit temples of ancient Greece. It was here, in this small, sun-drenched corner of the Mediterranean, that the foundations of the modern world were laid. And though the years have turned into centuries, the influence of those ancient thinkers, artists, and scientists echoes still, reverberating through the ages and leaving an indelible mark on every aspect of our lives. Take a moment to think about it. When you look at the world around you, what do you see? The power of reason in our political systems, the beauty of a work of art, the pursuit of knowledge in the sciences, each one of these aspects has its roots in ancient Greece. From the soft whispers of Socratic philosophy to the towering columns of the Parthenon, from the careful measurements of Euclid to the dramas performed in crowded amphitheaters, the legacy of Greek civilization surrounds us. It is in the way we question the world, in the art we create, in the way we build our societies and govern ourselves. The Greeks taught us to ask, why? They invited us to look beyond the surface and search for deeper meaning. It is through the minds of men like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle that the seeds of modern philosophy were planted. Their words still ring in our ears, calling us to think, to challenge, to examine not just the world around us, but our own beliefs and values. The Socratic method, the art of questioning and dialogue, transformed the way we approach knowledge, teaching us that no answer should ever be taken for granted. Philosophy is no longer a distant subject studied by scholars alone, it is part of our everyday thinking. It shapes the way we discuss right and wrong, truth and justice, purpose and meaning. And yet, Greek influence doesn't stop with philosophy. The Greeks saw beauty in all things, from the human body to the cosmos. They gave us a new language to express the world through art. Their sculptors brought life to stone, their painters brought color to walls, and their architects brought balance to buildings. The Parthenon, with its gleaming marble columns, is not just a relic of the past, it is a symbol of the perfection the Greeks sought in every detail of life. Its design, studied by architects and artists for centuries, speaks of the desire to create harmony between humanity and nature, between the divine and the earthly. The beauty of Greek sculpture, with its idealized forms and graceful poses, set the standard for the art that followed in the Western world. It is impossible to look at the works of Renaissance artists like Michelangelo without seeing the echoes of ancient Greece in their designs. But it wasn't only the beauty of the world that the Greeks sought to understand, they sought to explain it, too. It was here, in the hands of Greek thinkers like Euclid and Archimedes, that the building blocks of mathematics and science were formed. These early scholars gave us the tools to make sense of the world, to measure, to calculate, to predict. Euclid's geometry still forms the basis of much of modern mathematics. Archimedes' understanding of levers and pulleys laid the groundwork for countless inventions and discoveries. These men and women didn't just study the world, they sought to understand its very nature, to break it down into simple, logical truths. The impact of Greek science extends far beyond numbers and equations. It was the Greek philosophers who taught us to observe the world with open eyes, to look beyond the obvious and search for what lay beneath. They showed us the importance of reason, the need for evidence, the value of the scientific method long before it was formalized. When we observe nature, when we test our hypotheses, when we push the boundaries of knowledge, we are walking in the footsteps of these ancient thinkers. From medicine to astronomy, from physics to biology, the Greeks set the stage for the scientific revolution that would follow many centuries later. And it's not just in the intellectual realm that the Greeks left their mark. Their cultural achievements, their art, and their philosophy have shaped the very way we see ourselves. In their tragedies, comedies, and myths, the Greeks gave us a lens through which to view our own humanity. The works of Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes are still performed in theaters today, their characters still speaking to the struggles we face in our own lives. The Greek idea of the tragic hero, the flawed individual who falls due to their own shortcomings, is still relevant today in the stories we tell. Their comedies, full of wit and satire, remind us not to take ourselves too seriously, and their myths continue to resonate, offering timeless lessons about love, loss, and the gods who govern our fates. The legacy of ancient Greece is not just a matter of what they left behind, it's a living, breathing influence that shapes the world we live in today. When we look at our own governments, we see their fingerprints. The very idea of democracy, the belief that power should lie in the hands of the people, began in Athens. The political systems that govern much of the Western world, elected officials, voting, the rule of law, are built upon the foundation laid by Greek thinkers and leaders. The very concepts of citizenship, of justice, and of equality were born in the streets of Athens, where men gathered in the agora to debate and decide the fate of their city. And so, the influence of Greece is far from a relic of the past. It is part of our present and continues to shape our future. It is in the way we think about the world, the way we govern ourselves, the way we create art, and the way we strive for knowledge. The Greeks may be long gone, but their ideas that challenged the world, ideas that changed the course of history, continue to shape our lives today. They showed us that the pursuit of truth, beauty, and knowledge is a lifelong endeavor. They gave us the tools to understand the world and to build a better one. And as we look around us, we realize that the world we live in, our governments, our culture, our very way of thinking, would not be what it is without the Greeks. Their legacy lives on, not just in the pages of history, but in the streets we walk, in the debates we have, in the art we admire, and in the questions we ask. It is a legacy that is as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago, a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity, creativity, and the search for meaning.